Welcome to this video on isosceles and equilateral triangles. We're going to have a few math dictionary words for you, and we'll dive into some examples. An isosceles triangle. If you want to have this diagram, these are some words, some common words that we will use to describe an isosceles triangle, where the legs are the two sides that are congruent, and the base angles are kind of opposite those sides. They're at the base. Base is the only side that isn't congruent to the other two sides, and our vertex angle is the top of an isosceles triangle. So we have a theorem for 4-3 isosceles triangle. If the sides are congruent, then the base angles are congruent. That is what this is saying. And these symbols are off a little bit. That's supposed to say if AC is congruent to BC, then angle A is congruent to angle B. So if this side is congruent to that side, then the two angles, the base angles, are congruent. This goes the other direction as well if the base angles are congruent. So if the angles are congruent, then the sides opposite those angles are congruent. Two more words to get in there. Equilateral. If all sides are congruent, then all the angles are congruent. So if we have all the sides congruent, then all the angles are congruent. And if all the angles are congruent, then all the sides will also be congruent. This is supposed to say xy with a line on top congruent to yz congruent to zx. Let's dive into an example here. We have what appears to be an isosceles triangle, where we know that if the sides are congruent, we know the angles are congruent, and we're trying to find the measure of x here. Well, we know if we add all three angles in a triangle, we get 180. Let's take away the vertex angle. Take away 40 from that. That means we're left with 140 degrees. And if we know that each angle is equal, then we just have to cut that 140 in half to where we would get 70 degrees. So x is equal to 70 degrees. Let's try this one. Find x. We know that the angles are congruent, so the sides are congruent. And since we know that these two base angles are equal, I can say x plus 30 equals 2x. Solve for x. So x equals 30. All right, what you're not supposed to know in this one prior to this problem, so you're only supposed to know that the three angles are congruent. Well, if all angles are congruent, that means that all of the sides are congruent. So if we wanted to find t, we could take 2t plus 1, set it equal to 4t minus 8, and solve. So we're going to subtract 4t. We get negative 2t plus 1 equals negative 8. Subtract 1 on both sides, we get negative 2t equals negative 9. Divide by negative 2, t equals 4.5. So if we wanted to find what each side was, we could plug it back in. So 2 times 4.5 is 9, plus 1. Each side is equal to 10. Let's try this one. I think all you're given in this one to start with is this information, where all sides are equal. If all the sides are equal, then that means that all the angles are congruent. And if all the angles are congruent, 3 angles add up to 180. They all have to be the same. So if we divide it by 3, each angle has to be 60 degrees. So this right here, 3x plus 15, is going to be equal to 60 degrees. We already know what that angle measure is. We want to find x. So subtract 15 on both sides. We'll get 3x equals 45. Divide by 3, and x equals 15. Here is your assignment.